The gentle morning light filtered through the curtains of the spacious bedroom as Lily awoke to the sound of birds chirping outside her window. Though she couldn't see the sunbeams dancing across the marble floor, she could feel their warmth on her skin. Lily had been blind since she was 9 years old, when a rare illness had gradually stolen her sight. Now at 32, she had long ago accepted her reality and had built a life full of sounds, textures, and scents that guided her through each day. Lily ran her fingers along the silk bedsheets, a luxury she still wasn't used to after 3 years of marriage to Richard Thompson. She listened carefully, noting that her husband had already left for work. The house was quiet except for the housekeeper moving about downstairs. 15 years without sight had sharpened Lily's other senses remarkably. She could identify people by their footsteps, recognize different perfumes from across a room, and navigate familiar spaces with such ease that newcomers often didn't immediately realize she was blind. Her fingers were especially sensitive, allowing her to read Braille with exceptional speed and to feel the subtle textures most people overlooked. "Good morning. Ms. Lily," called out Beatrice, the housekeeper, from the doorway. "Would you like your breakfast on the patio today? The weather is lovely." "That sounds perfect, Bea," Lily replied with a warm smile. "I'll be down in 20 minutes. Lily made her way to the bathroom, her fingers lightly trailing along the wall until she reached the door. Every item in her personal space was meticulously organized, so she could find things without assistance. Independence had always been important to her, even more so since marrying Richard. As she showered, Lily's mind wandered back to the day she met her husband. She had been working at the public library, where she organized community reading programs and events. The library had received a substantial donation, and Richard, the wealthy donor, had come to meet the staff. Lily remembered how his voice had struck her first, deep and confident, with a slight rasp that she found instantly appealing. "You must be Lily Chen," he had said, his hand gently taking hers. "I've heard wonderful things about your work with the children's literacy program." She had been surprised he knew who she was, let alone about her specific contributions. That day, Richard had spent over an hour talking with her about books, music, and her passion for making literature accessible to everyone. He had seemed genuinely interested, asking thoughtful questions and listening intently to her answers. A week later, flowers arrived at the library with an invitation to dinner. 6 months after that, Richard proposed during a private concert he had arranged just for them, a string quartet playing Debussy, her favorite composer. The romance had been like a whirlwind, leaving Lily breathless and at times a bit overwhelmed by the intensity of it all. Now, as Lily carefully selected her clothes for the day, a light blue blouse and tailored pants that Beatrice had described to her when they went shopping, she thought about how much her life had changed. Before meeting Richard, she had lived in a modest apartment, taken the bus to work, and saved for months to afford small luxuries. Now she resided in a mansion with staff to help with anything she needed, wore designer clothes, and never worried about money. After dressing and applying the light makeup she had been taught to put on by feel, Lily made her way downstairs, counting steps as she went. 15 to the landing, turn right. 22 more to the main floor. She could smell coffee and fresh bread as she approached the patio. "Your breakfast is at 2 o'clock on the table," Beatrice said, using the clock face system they had established to help Lily locate items. "Fresh fruit at 10, coffee at 4. "Thank you, Bea. Any messages from Richard this morning?" There was a slight hesitation before Beatrice answered, something only Lily's sensitive hearing would have detected. "Mr. Thompson called to remind you about the dinner party tonight. He emphasized that it's very important. The Wilsons and the Goldsteins will be attending, along with several potential investors for his new project." Lily nodded, feeling a familiar knot form in her stomach. Richard's business dinners were becoming more frequent, and she had noticed a change in how he introduced her to his colleagues and friends. In the beginning, he had proudly spoken of her accomplishments and intelligence. Lately, however, he seemed to emphasize her blindness more, sometimes in ways that made her uncomfortable. "He also asked that you wear the blue dress he bought last month," Beatrice added softly. Lily's fingers tightened slightly around her coffee cup. The dress in question was beautiful. Beatrice had described it as the color of a summer sky with delicate beadwork, but it was also more revealing than what Lily typically wore. Richard had been insistent about buying it despite her reservations. I see, Lily said simply, not wanting to discuss her marriage with the housekeeper, despite how kind Beatrice had always been. As she ate her breakfast, Lily reflected on the gradual shift in her relationship with Richard. Their first year of marriage had been like a fairy tale. Richard had been attentive, patient, and seemingly in awe of how she navigated the world. He had taken her to concerts, museum tours designed for the visually impaired, and even a cooking class where she learned to create elaborate dishes by smell and taste alone. But something had changed in the past year. Richard had started parading her at social events like some kind of novelty. "My brilliant wife," he would say, "who doesn't let her blindness stop her from doing anything." On the surface, the words were complimentary, but Lily detected the subtle tone of condescension that crept in. Worse were the times he would deliberately move things in her path at home, then loudly praise her when she inevitably bumped into them. "Remarkable how she adapts," he would say to guests, as if she weren't standing right there. After breakfast, Lily decided to spend the morning in the music room. Before losing her sight, she had taken piano lessons, showing some promise. The illness that claimed her vision had derailed those dreams, and she hadn't touched a piano in years. Recently, however, she had felt drawn to the grand piano that sat largely unused in their home. Her fingers trailed along the wall as she made her way through the house. 15 steps from the patio door to the main hallway, then 32 steps to the music room. The door was always kept open, and as she entered, she could smell the lemon polish used on the wooden surfaces. Lily moved carefully toward where she knew the piano stood, her hands outstretched until they found the smooth, cool surface of the instrument. She traced its contours, feeling the craftsmanship in every curve. Slowly, she lifted the cover protecting the keys and sat down on the bench. For several minutes, she just sat there, her fingers hovering over the ivory. Then tentatively, she pressed one key. The clear note rang out in the quiet room, and something stirred in her memory. She pressed another key and another, attempting to recall a simple melody from her childhood. The notes were hesitant and sometimes discordant, but there was something deeply satisfying about creating sound this way. Lily became so absorbed in her exploration that she didn't notice the housekeeper watching from the doorway with a thoughtful expression. Later that afternoon, as Lily was preparing for the dinner party, her phone rang. The special ringtone told her it was Richard. "Hello, darling," she answered, putting the call on speaker as she sat at her vanity. "Lily, I'm just confirming you'll be ready by 7, Richard said, his voice carrying the brisk tone he used when discussing business matters. "The Wilsons are particularly important. Harold Wilson manages a substantial investment portfolio that could be crucial for my new development project." "I'll be ready," Lily assured him. "Beatrice is helping me with my hair after I finish my makeup." "Excellent. And you're wearing the blue dress I bought you?" Lily hesitated briefly. "I was thinking perhaps the black one might be more appropriate for a business dinner." There was a pause, and when Richard spoke again, his voice had that silky quality that always preceded a disagreement. "Lily, sweetheart, I specifically chose the blue one because it complements your complexion so beautifully. Our guests tonight appreciate fine things, and you, my dear, are the finest thing in our home." The compliment felt hollow, almost rehearsed. Lily sensed something unsaid behind his words. "Richard, is there something special about tonight's dinner that I should know about?" Another pause. "Just that it's important to make the right impression. These are powerful people, Lily. They could make or break this project." After the call ended, Lily sat quietly, her unseeing eyes directed toward where she knew her reflection would be in the mirror. The knot in her stomach had tightened. Tonight felt different, somehow more significant than previous gatherings. Richard's emphasis on her appearance and his insistence on the more revealing dress troubled her. As she finished preparing, Lily couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting in her marriage, a subtle power dynamic that left her increasingly uneasy. But she was not a woman easily intimidated, even by the husband who had swept her off her feet. Whatever game Richard might be playing, Lily resolved to face the evening with the same quiet dignity she had maintained throughout her life. She straightened her shoulders and called for Beatrice to help with her hair. Whatever the night might bring, she would face it with grace and strength. After all, she had navigated a world of darkness for most of her life. She knew how to find her way through the shadows, even those that might be gathering in her marriage. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 7 times as Lily made her final preparations for the dinner party. She wore the blue dress Richard had insisted upon, though Beatrice had helped her add a delicate lace shawl that provided a bit more coverage while still complementing the outfit. Her dark hair was swept up in an elegant style, and a pair of sapphire earrings, a gift from Richard on their first anniversary, adorned her ears. "You look beautiful, Ms. Lily," Beatrice said softly as she helped adjust the shawl. "Truly stunning." "Thank you for your help, Bea," Lily replied with a small smile. "How much time before the guests arrive?" "About 15 minutes. Mr. Thompson just called to say he's on his way home now." Lily nodded, taking a deep breath to calm her nerves. "Would you mind describing the dining room setup to me? I want to be able to move around confidently tonight." As Beatrice detailed the table arrangement and seating plan, Lily created a mental map. 8 people would be dining tonight, herself and Richard, the Wilsons, the Goldsteins, and a couple named Parker, who were apparently major players in local real estate development. Richard had placed Lily directly across from himself, with the most important guests seated on either side of them. The sound of the front door opening announced Richard's arrival. His footsteps, quick, purposeful strides on the marble floor, approached the bedroom. "Lily," he called, his voice warm and pleased as he entered. "You look absolutely exquisite." She felt his hands on her shoulders as he turned her toward what she presumed was a mirror. "The perfect vision of elegance and beauty," he continued, his fingers lightly touching the sapphire earrings. "These were an excellent choice." "Thank you, Richard," she replied, feeling his cologne envelope her, an expensive blend of sandalwood and spice that she had once found intoxicating, but now seemed somehow overwhelming. "I'm looking forward to meeting your business associates." His hands tightened slightly on her shoulders. "They're very important people, Lily, especially Harold Wilson. His investment firm manages billions, and he's considering backing my Riverside development project." "I'll do my best to make a good impression," she promised, though she couldn't help adding, "though I hope the project itself is what will ultimately convince him." Richard's laugh held a note of tension. "Of course, darling, but never underestimate the power of a charming dinner companion. People make business decisions based on all sorts of factors." He kissed her cheek. "Just be your lovely self. That's all I ask." The doorbell chimed and Richard's posture straightened. "That'll be our first guests. Shall we?" He placed her hand in the crook of his arm, and they made their way downstairs. Lily counted steps silently, keeping track of exactly where she was in the house. As they reached the bottom of the stairs, she could hear voices in the foyer, Beatrice greeting the arrivals, the rustle of coats being taken. "Harold, Patricia." Richard's voice boomed with practiced joviality. "Welcome to our home. May I present my wife, Lily?" Lily extended her hand in the direction of Richard's voice, smiling warmly. "It's a pleasure to meet you both." A large, firm hand enclosed hers. "The pleasure is ours," replied a deep voice. Harold Wilson, she presumed. "Richard has told us so much about you." "All good things, I hope," Lily said with a light laugh. "Oh, indeed," came a female voice, Patricia, as she took Lily's hand next. Her grip was cool and adorned with rings that pressed against Lily's skin. "Richard says you're quite remarkable." There was something in the way she said remarkable that made Lily wonder exactly what Richard had told them about her. Before she could respond, the doorbell rang again, announcing more arrivals. The next 20 minutes were a blur of introductions and small talk as the Goldsteins and the Parkers arrived. Lily did her best to associate voices with names, creating mental notes about each guest. David Goldstein had a slight Boston accent and smelled of mint. His wife, Jennifer, spoke quickly and wore bangles that jingled when she moved. Thomas Parker had a booming laugh and calloused hands, unusual for a businessman, Lily thought. His wife, Claire, spoke softly and seemed to stand very close to her husband as if seeking protection. As they moved to the living room for pre-dinner drinks, Lily noticed Richard's behavior shifting subtly. His voice grew louder, more performative, and he kept positioning himself between Lily and whoever she was speaking with. "Scotch, Harold?" Richard asked. "Lily, darling, why don't you show Patricia your lovely collection of art while I fix drinks for everyone?" Lily felt a flicker of irritation. Richard knew perfectly well she couldn't show anyone anything, and while she had learned about the artwork in their home through touch and detailed descriptions, it was hardly her collection. Richard had acquired most pieces before they met. "I'd be happy to talk about the artwork," Lily said smoothly. though I'm afraid I can't show it in the traditional sense. Richard has curated quite a diverse collection over the years. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry, Patricia gasped, clearly flustered. Richard didn't mention. That is, I didn't realize that I'm blind? Lily finished gently. It's quite all right. I lost my sight when I was 9, so I've had many years to adapt. Extraordinary, Harold said, his voice closer now. And yet you move with such confidence. If Richard hadn't mentioned it, I might not have guessed. Lily smiled politely, though inwardly she wondered why Richard had mentioned her blindness to these people before they'd even met. Years of practice, she said simply. Now about the art collection. The piece above the fireplace is a Monet, one of his water lily paintings from the later period. The colors are said to be particularly vibrant. As she spoke about the artwork, describing what she had learned from Richard and art books, she could feel the atmosphere in the room changing. The initial awkwardness faded, replaced by what seemed like genuine interest, though Lily detected notes of something else, perhaps amazement, or even pity. Richard returned with the drinks, and Lily could tell from his footsteps that he was pleased with how things were going. Isn't she remarkable? He said, placing a drink in Lily's hand and squeezing her shoulder. I tell everyone that Lily puts us all to shame. The obstacles she overcomes daily would flatten any of us. Comment sent an uncomfortable ripple through Lily. This was new, Richard explicitly calling attention to her blindness as if it were a party trick. Before she could respond, Beatrice announced that dinner was served. In the dining room, Richard became even more theatrical. As Lily confidently navigated to her seat, having memorized the layout earlier, he narrated her movements to the guests. Watch how she finds her chair without any assistance, he commented, as if she were a trained animal performing a feat. Perfect spatial awareness. Lily felt her cheeks warm with embarrassment but kept her composure. Richard, she said quietly, I'm sure our guests would rather discuss your exciting new project than watch me find my seat. There was an awkward pause before Harold Wilson cleared his throat. Yes, tell us more about this riverside development, Richard. The prospectus looked promising, but I'd like to hear your vision firsthand. Relieved, Lily settled into her chair as Richard launched into a detailed description of his project. A luxury residential and commercial complex along the river that would revitalize the area. Though Lily knew from community meetings she'd attended that revitalize often meant displacing lower-income residents. Throughout the meal, Richard continued to find ways to draw attention to Lily's blindness. When she precisely cut her steak, he commented on her extraordinary adaptation. When she reached for her wine glass without hesitation, he made sure everyone noticed. It's muscle memory, Lily explained evenly after the third such comment, like the way you drive your car without thinking about every movement. The human brain is wonderfully adaptable. Indeed it is, David Goldstein agreed. I read recently about neuroplasticity and how the brain rewires itself after injury or sensory loss. Fascinating stuff. That's exactly right, Lily said, grateful for the shift to a more dignified conversation. In fact, I've participated in a few studies at the university on that very topic. Lily has a degree in psychology, Richard interjected, though his tone suggested he was reminding her of something she'd forgotten, rather than sharing information with the guests. Though she hasn't practiced since we married, of course. The slight dismissal of her education stung. I still keep up with the research, Lily said, and I volunteer with support groups for the visually impaired twice a month. Such admirable work, Claire Parker said, speaking up for the first time. My mother lost her vision to macular degeneration in her 70s. The adjustment was tremendously difficult for her. The conversation turned to healthcare and aging, and for a while, Lily felt herself being treated as a full participant, rather than an oddity. But as dessert was served, Richard steered things back to his preferred narrative. Before we finish our evening, he announced, his chair scraping back as he stood, I'd like to propose a toast. To new friendships and profitable ventures. The clink of glasses followed, and to my extraordinary wife who inspires me daily with her courage. Lily smiled tightly, raising her glass in acknowledgement. In fact, Richard continued, his voice taking on a tone Lily recognized with dread, the one he used when he was about to put her on display. I think we should move to the music room for coffee. Lily has many talents I'd like to share with you all. Her stomach dropped. What was he planning now? She hadn't mentioned to him her recent interest in the piano. Had Beatrice said something? Or had he noticed the slightly disturbed dust on the keys? Richard, she began carefully. I'm sure our guests would prefer— Nonsense, he interrupted. Everyone enjoys music after dinner. And wait until you see what my Lily can do. It's truly inspiring. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Lily felt the eyes of every guest upon her as Richard came around the table to pull out her chair. This way, everyone, he said cheerfully, placing Lily's hand on his arm in a grip that brooked no argument. I promise you've never experienced anything quite like this before. As they walked toward the music room, Lily's heart raced. Whatever Richard had planned, she sensed it was about to change everything. The music room fell silent as Richard guided Lily through the doorway. The familiar scent of lemon polish and old wood enveloped her, but now the space felt different, filled with the presence of strangers whose expectations weighed heavily in the air. Lily could hear the rustle of clothing as their guests filed in behind them, the clink of coffee cups being placed on side tables, the subtle shifting of bodies as people found places to stand or sit. Ladies and gentlemen, Richard announced, his voice carrying that theatrical quality Lily had come to dread. I've brought you here for a special treat. His hand pressed firmly against the small of her back, guiding her forward. As you know, my wife has overcome tremendous obstacles in her life. Tonight I'd like to show you just how remarkable her abilities truly are. Lily's heart pounded as Richard led her to what she knew was the grand piano in the center of the room. Her fingers tensed against his arm, trying to signal her discomfort, but he either didn't notice or chose to ignore it. Richard, she whispered urgently. What are you doing? He leaned close, his breath warm against her ear. Trust me, darling. This is important. Before she could protest further, she felt the piano bench against the back of her legs. Richard's hands on her shoulders pressed her gently but firmly downward until she was seated, facing what she knew to be the keyboard with its fallboard still covering the keys. Many of you might not know, Richard continued, addressing their guests, that music is often a sanctuary for those without sight. The connection between blindness and musical ability is well documented throughout history. Stevie Wonder, Ray Charles, he paused for effect. And now, I'd like you to experience the hidden talent of my own dear wife. A cold realization washed over Lily. He expected her to play. He wanted to show her off like some curiosity in a Victorian sideshow. The worst part was that he had no idea she'd been secretly exploring the piano again. He thought he was setting her up for public humiliation, a spectacle of awkwardness for their important guests. Richard, she said, her voice low but clear enough for those nearby to hear. I haven't played since I was a child. His hand squeezed her shoulder, fingers digging in slightly. Don't be modest, darling. I've heard you. His voice dropped to a whisper. This could make all the difference with Wilson. Just play something simple. Anything. So he had known about her recent explorations at the piano. But clearly he hadn't been watching long enough to know how rudimentary her attempts had been. She could barely pick out a simple melody with one hand, let alone perform for an audience. She heard someone, Patricia Wilson, she thought, clear her throat uncomfortably. Perhaps we shouldn't put Lily on the spot like this, the woman suggested kindly. Not everyone enjoys performing under pressure. Nonsense, Richard replied with a forced laugh. Lily thrives under pressure. Don't you, darling? It's part of what made me fall in love with her, that indomitable spirit. The falseness of his words made something shift inside Lily. 3 years of marriage, and she had never truly seen the man she had married until this moment. He didn't admire her independence or her strength. He saw her blindness as a novelty, something to be exploited for his gain. The thought settled over her like a weight, and yet paradoxically it also set something free. Lily straightened her back and reached forward to find the fallboard. She lifted it smoothly, revealing the keys beneath. The cool ivory under her fingertips felt both alien and familiar. I'm afraid my husband has exaggerated my abilities, she said calmly, addressing the room at large. But since we're all here, I'll try not to disappoint you. She could practically feel Richard's smile of triumph behind her, his certainty that she would embarrass herself and that somehow this would endear him to Harold Wilson and the others, the magnanimous husband showcasing his brave, fumbling wife. For a moment, Lily sat perfectly still, her hands hovering over the keys. She thought of the simple melodies she had been trying to recall during her private moments in this room. Nothing suitable came to mind. Instead, she remembered something else. The piano lessons from her childhood before the illness that took her sight. Her teacher, Mrs. Abramson, with her gentle hands guiding Lily's smaller ones across the keys. "Feel the music, Lily," she used to say. "Don't just play the notes, feel them." Taking a deep breath, Lily placed her fingers on the keys and pressed down gently. A single clear note resonated in the quiet room. Then another, and another. No melody yet, just individual notes as she reacquainted herself with the placement of the keys, the distance between them, the subtle differences in the white and black keys beneath her fingertips. Richard shifted impatiently behind her, and she could imagine his forced smile growing strained as the seconds ticked by with only random notes filling the air. Good. Let him squirm. Then, without consciously deciding to do so, Lily found herself playing the first few notes of a simple piece she had learned as a child. Für Elise. The beginning was halting, uncertain, her muscle memory rusty after so many years. She hit a wrong note and paused, then started again from the beginning. This time, something remarkable happened. As her fingers moved across the keys, memories flooded back. Not just of the notes themselves, but of the feeling of playing, the connection between her fingers and the music. She progressed further into the piece, the melody growing more confident with each measure. The room had gone completely silent except for the piano. Lily could feel the shift in the atmosphere, from awkward anticipation to surprised attention. She wasn't playing perfectly by any means, but she was playing recognizably, with growing assurance. When she reached a section she couldn't remember, instead of stopping, she found herself improvising, creating a bridge of her own before finding her way back to the familiar parts of the composition. The music flowed from her fingers as if they had a mind of their own, as if they had been waiting all these years to speak this language again. As she played, Lily became aware of something she hadn't expected, a profound sense of joy. Despite the humiliating circumstances, despite Richard's manipulation, the music itself was pure, a direct line to a part of herself she had forgotten existed. She felt tears prick behind her eyes but blinked them away, focusing entirely on the sensation of the keys beneath her fingers, the vibrations of the strings, the way the notes hung in the air around her. When she finally finished, the silence that followed was complete. For a terrible moment, Lily thought her performance had been even worse than she'd realized. Then she heard a sharp intake of breath, followed by the sound of hands coming together. Someone was applauding. Others joined in, the applause growing until it filled the room. "Lily," Claire Parker's voice came from nearby, filled with genuine wonder. "That was beautiful. Truly beautiful." "I had no idea," Harold Wilson added, his deep voice carrying a note of respect that hadn't been there during dinner. "Richard, you never mentioned your wife was so talented." Lily turned slightly on the bench, facing the direction of Richard's last position. She could sense him standing very still, processing what had just happened. His plan had backfired spectacularly. Instead of seeing his wife fumble awkwardly at the piano, generating sympathy for him and amusement at her expense, their guests had witnessed something unexpected, genuine talent emerging despite years of dormancy. Richard began, then cleared his throat. "Yes, well, I always knew Lily had musical ability. That's why I insisted on having this piano, though she rarely plays." The lie was so transparent that Lily almost laughed. Instead, she smiled and turned back to the keyboard. "It's been many years," she said simply. "But music has a way of staying with you. Would you play something else?" Jennifer Goldstein asked eagerly. "Something more contemporary, perhaps?" Lily hesitated, her confidence in her abilities still shaky. But the rush of reconnecting with music had awakened something in her, a hunger to explore this rediscovered part of herself. "I'm not sure how well I'll do with something more complex," she admitted. "But there is a piece I used to love." Her fingers found their way to the opening notes of Clair de Lune by Debussy. This was more challenging, and she knew she would make mistakes, but somehow that didn't matter anymore. She wasn't performing for Richard's business associates or even for Richard himself. She was playing for herself, reclaiming something precious that had been taken from her. Not by her blindness, but by her own belief that certain doors had closed forever. As the delicate, Dreamlike melody filled the room. Lily felt a shift in her sense of self. For years, she had defined herself partly by her limitations, careful to never appear helpless while simultaneously accepting that certain experiences were beyond her reach. Now, with every note she played, a new possibility opened before her. Not just music, but the revelation that other forgotten joys might still be accessible, waiting to be rediscovered. Behind her, she heard Richard speaking quietly to Harold Wilson, no doubt trying to steer the conversation back to business. But his voice lacked the confident authority it had carried earlier. Something fundamental had changed in the room's dynamics, and everyone felt it. Lily smiled to herself as her fingers danced across the keys, making occasional errors but continuing undaunted. Tonight had been meant as her humiliation, but instead had become her liberation. Whatever came next, whether with Richard or with her rediscovered passion for music, she would face it with new strength and a deeper understanding of her own resilience. The final notes of Claire de Lune faded into the stillness of the room. Lily's hands rested gently on the keys, her breathing slightly elevated from the emotional effort of playing. For several moments no one spoke, as if reluctant to break the spell her music had cast over them. Then the applause began, not polite, obligatory clapping, but genuine, enthusiastic appreciation. Lily felt a warm flush of pleasure spread through her body. She hadn't played perfectly by any means, but she had connected with something authentic, and their guests had felt it too. "That was extraordinary," Harold Wilson said, his voice much closer now. Lily sensed him approaching the piano. "My mother was a piano teacher, so I grew up surrounded by music. You have a natural sensitivity that can't be taught." "Thank you," Lily replied, genuinely touched by the compliment. "I'm very rusty. I haven't played regularly since I was a child." "Which makes it all the more impressive," Jennifer Goldstein added from across the room. "I took lessons for 10 years and never played with half that feeling." Lily smiled in the direction of Jennifer's voice. "Music is mostly feeling, I think. The technical part can be learned, but the emotional connection is what matters." She was aware of Richard's silence throughout this exchange. She could sense him standing off to the side, likely near the doorway. His usual commanding presence diminished somehow. The air around him felt charged with tension. "I don't suppose you give lessons?" Claire Parker asked with a small laugh. "I've always wanted to learn but never had the patience." Before Lily could respond, Richard finally spoke up. "I'm afraid Lily doesn't have the time for teaching. Our schedules are quite full with charity events and my business functions." His voice carried a forced lightness that didn't quite mask the edge beneath. "Speaking of business, Harold, I'd love to show you those property maps we discussed earlier. I have them in my study." Lily recognized the attempt to reassert control over the evening, to steer it back to his original purpose. But something had fundamentally shifted in the room's dynamics. "Perhaps in a moment, Richard," Harold replied, his tone polite but firm. "I'm quite enjoying the music." "Lily, do you know any more pieces?" The question hung in the air like a challenge, not to Lily, but to Richard. In that moment, Lily understood that Harold Wilson had seen through her husband's performance, had recognized the attempted humiliation for what it was, and he had chosen to align himself with her instead. "I'm afraid my repertoire is very limited," Lily admitted, "but there is one more piece I might remember parts of. It was my favorite as a child." She positioned her hands once more and began to play Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, slower and with more hesitation than the previous pieces, but with growing confidence as the muscle memory returned. The haunting melody filled the room, creating an atmosphere of intimate melancholy that seemed to touch everyone present. As she played, Lily became aware of movement around her. Someone, Patricia Wilson, she thought, had settled onto the piano bench beside her, careful not to disturb her playing. Others had drawn closer to the piano, forming a semicircle around her. Only Richard remained apart, his isolation almost palpable. When she finished, Patricia spoke softly beside her. "That was lovely, dear. How long has it been since you played regularly?" "More than 20 years, Lily answered. "Since before I lost my sight." "And you've never considered taking it up again?" David Goldstein asked from nearby. "You clearly have talent." Lily hesitated, aware of Richard's presence across the room. "Life takes unexpected turns," she said carefully. "Some doors close and we focus on the ones that remain open." "But doors can be reopened," Patricia said gently. especially when you have the key inside you all along. The metaphor wasn't lost on anyone in the room. A thoughtful silence followed, broken finally by Harold Wilson clearing his throat. "Richard," he said, his deep voice carrying authority, "I think I would like to see those property maps now, and I'd like to discuss some modifications to the proposed investment structure." "Of course," Richard replied quickly, clearly eager to salvage something from the evening. "This way to my study. Thomas, David, would you care to join us?" The men excused themselves, leaving Lily with the wives. As soon as the door closed behind them, the atmosphere in the room relaxed visibly. "Lily," Jennifer said, moving to sit in a chair near the piano, "may I ask you something rather personal?" "You can ask," Lily replied with a small smile. "I might not answer." The women laughed, and Lily sensed a growing camaraderie between them. "Fair enough," Jennifer continued. "I was wondering if you've had any formal training since losing your sight. There are specialized methods for teaching music to visually impaired students. My cousin works with an organization that focuses on exactly that." Lily shook her head. "No, nothing formal. Tonight was the first time I've really played in decades. I've been experimenting a bit recently, but very privately." She didn't add that she had kept it secret from Richard. She didn't need to. The subtext was clear to everyone. "Well, you're a natural," Claire said warmly, "and you should know that there are resources available if you wanted to pursue it further." She paused. "That is, if you're interested." The kindness in these women's voices, women who had arrived as Richard's business connections but were now speaking to her as a person in her own right, touched Lily deeply. "I think I would be interested," she said softly, surprising herself with the admission. "Very interested, actually. I have a friend who teaches at the conservatory," Patricia offered. "She has experience with adaptive methods for musicians with various disabilities. I'd be happy to put you in touch with her." For the next half hour, while their husbands discussed business in the study, the women talked about music, adaptive technologies, and organizations dedicated to arts accessibility. Lily found herself opening up about her childhood piano lessons, the illness that had taken her sight, and her recent yearning to reconnect with music. "It's strange," she confessed. "Until tonight I wasn't sure if I could still play at all. I've been too afraid to really try, just pressing random keys mostly." "Sometimes we need a push," Claire said, "even if it comes from unexpected places." The conversation gradually shifted to other topics, their work, their interests, their lives. For the first time in years, Lily felt herself being treated as a complete person, not defined primarily by her blindness or her status as Richard's wife. When the men finally returned from the study, Lily could tell immediately from their footsteps and voices that something significant had happened. Richard's stride was too measured, too controlled, a sign he was holding his emotions tightly in check. Harold Wilson, by contrast, spoke with relaxed authority as they entered the music room. "Ladies, I apologize for the interruption to the concert," Harold said. "Business matters. All settled now." He cleared his throat. "Richard and I have come to an understanding about the Riverside project. I'll be making a more modest investment than originally discussed, with some significant modifications to the plan." The subtle emphasis on modifications told Lily that Richard hadn't gotten what he wanted, at least not entirely. She felt a twinge of sympathy for her husband, despite everything. His business matters were important to him, and tonight had not gone as planned. "It's getting rather late," Richard said, his voice tight but polite. "Perhaps we should call it an evening." As their guests began to gather their things, Lily was surprised to feel Patricia Wilson press something into her hand. A business card. From the texture of it. "My friend at the conservatory," Patricia whispered. "Call her. And my number is on there too. Let's have lunch next week." Before Lily could respond, Patricia had moved away to join her husband. One by one, the guests said their goodbyes, each of them taking a moment to speak personally to Lily about her playing, to thank her for the unexpected musical interlude, to express hopes of seeing her again soon. When the front door finally closed behind the last couple, Lily and Richard stood alone in the foyer. The silence between them was heavy with unspoken words. Lily could feel the tension radiating from him. Anger, embarrassment, confusion, all tightly controlled beneath his polished exterior. "Well," he said finally, his voice cool and distant. "That was an interesting evening." Lily nodded, her fingers still holding Patricia's card. "Yes, it was." Wilson is only investing half of what we discussed initially, Richard continued, a hint of bitterness creeping into his tone. And he's insisting on community housing as part of the development. It will cut into the profit significantly. I'm sorry, Lily said and meant it. Despite the evening's revelations about her husband's character, she took no pleasure in his professional disappointment. Richard sighed heavily. Are you? I wonder. He moved past her toward the stairs. I need to revise some projections. Don't wait up. As his footsteps receded up the staircase, Lily stood motionless in the foyer, the business card still clutched in her hand. The evening had changed something fundamental between them, revealed truths about their marriage that couldn't be unseen or unfelt. And yet, alongside the pain of those revelations had come something unexpected, a rediscovery of herself, of possibilities she had long since abandoned. She moved carefully through the quiet house to the music room, drawn back to the piano like a magnet. Sitting on the bench, she ran her fingers lightly over the keys without pressing down, feeling their smooth, cool surfaces beneath her fingertips. 20 years, she whispered to herself. 20 years of silence. Then, with deliberate intent, she began to play again, softly so as not to disturb Richard in his study, but with growing confidence. Tonight had been meant as her humiliation, but had instead become the first step on a new path, one she would walk whether Richard chose to join her or not. 3 weeks had passed, since the dinner party that had changed everything. Lily sat in the passenger seat of Beatrice's modest sedan, her hands folded neatly in her lap as they drove through the city. The morning air coming through the half-open window carried the scent of fresh rain and blooming flowers, spring asserting itself after a long winter. We're almost there, Beatrice said, turning onto what Lily could tell was a quieter street. About 2 more minutes. Thank you for driving me, Lily replied, smoothing a wrinkle from her skirt. She had chosen her outfit carefully that morning, a simple but elegant blouse and skirt combination that felt professional yet comfortable. I appreciate you rearranging your schedule. It's no trouble at all, Ms. Lily, Beatrice assured her. I'm happy to help. And I'm excited for you. This is a big step indeed. Today marked Lily's first formal piano lesson in over 20 years. After the dinner party, she had finally called the number Patricia Wilson had given her. Eleanor Mitchell, a music professor at the City Conservatory, had been warm and enthusiastic on the phone, explaining that she had developed teaching methods specifically for visually impaired musicians. They had arranged for weekly lessons starting today. Richard hadn't been pleased when Lily told him about her plans. The days following the dinner party had been tense, with Richard alternating between cold silence and forced politeness. The failure to secure Harold Wilson's full investment had hit him hard, both financially and to his pride. While he never directly blamed Lily, the unspoken accusation hung in the air between them. You really want to pursue this? He had asked when she mentioned the lessons, his voice carefully neutral. At your age, starting practically from scratch? The question had stung, a subtle reminder of limitations, of doors supposedly closed. But Lily had found a new resolve since that night at the piano. Yes, she had answered simply. I do, and surprisingly, after a long pause, Richard had sighed and said, Fine, if it matters that much to you. He hadn't offered to drive her to the lessons, though, or shown any further interest in her newfound passion, so Beatrice had stepped in, rearranging her Thursday mornings to accommodate Lily's schedule. The car slowed and then turned, tires crunching on what sounded like a gravel driveway. We're here, Beatrice announced as she brought the vehicle to a stop. It's a lovely old Victorian house, pale yellow with white trim. Very charming. Professor Mitchell mentioned she teaches from her home studio, Lily said, gathering her purse and the folder containing the Braille music sheets Patricia had helped her order. What time should I expect you back? I'll return at 11:30, but I've put Professor Mitchell's number in your phone just in case. It's saved under Eleanor. As Beatrice helped her from the car and guided her to the front path, Lily felt a flutter of nervous excitement in her stomach. This step represented more than just piano lessons. It was her first independent pursuit in years, something she had chosen for herself, separate from her identity as Richard's wife. The door opened before they reached it. You must be Lily, called a warm, melodic voice. I'm Eleanor. Welcome to my home. After quick introductions, Beatrice departed with promises to return promptly, and Lily found herself following Eleanor into the house. The scent of coffee and something freshly baked filled the air, mingling with the distinctive smell of old books and furniture polish. "Patricia has told me so much about your playing," Eleanor said as she guided Lily through what felt like a hallway. "She was quite moved by your performance." "It was hardly a performance," Lily demurred, "just fumbling through pieces I barely remembered." "Which makes it all the more remarkable," Eleanor replied. Her footsteps paused and Lily heard the sound of a door opening. "Here we are, my studio." The room they entered had different acoustics. Higher ceilings, Lily guessed, and probably wood floors rather than carpet. The air felt different too, cooler and somehow expectant. "There are 2 pianos," Eleanor explained. "A grand for performances and a more modest upright that I use for teaching. Today I thought we'd start with an assessment of where you are currently. No pressure. I just want to hear you play and see what we have to build upon." For the next hour, Eleanor gently guided Lily through scales, simple exercises, and finally the pieces she had played at the dinner party. The professor's teaching style was encouraging but precise, focusing on technique while honoring the emotional connection Lily brought to the music. "You have a natural musicality," Eleanor observed as Lily finished playing Für Elise. "Your interpretation is intuitive and expressive. What you lack is simply practice and some technical refinement, both of which will come with time." "Do you think—" Lily hesitated, then pushed forward with the question that had been lingering in her mind. "Do you think it's too late for me to become truly proficient? I'm 32 after all, and most serious pianists start as children." Eleanor's laugh was warm and genuine. "My dear, I had a student who began at 67 after retiring from dentistry. Within 5 years, he was giving recitals at retirement homes and community centers. Age is irrelevant. Desire and dedication are what matter." She paused, then added more softly, "And you have something many technically perfect pianists lack. You play from the heart. That cannot be taught." By the time Beatrice returned to pick her up, Lily felt as if she were floating on air. Eleanor had given her specific exercises to practice, recommendations for audio tutorials, and most importantly, confidence that her dream of playing well was achievable. "Same time next Thursday?" Eleanor asked as they reached the front door. "Yes, please," Lily replied, unable to keep the enthusiasm from her voice. "I'll practice every day." "I have no doubt you will," Eleanor said, giving Lily's hand a warm squeeze. "You have the spark, Lily. Trust it." On the drive home, Lily filled Beatrice in on the lesson, her words tumbling out in excited bursts. The housekeeper listened attentively, her own joy evident in her responses. "I'm so happy for you, Miss Lily," Beatrice said as they pulled into the driveway of the Thompson house. "It's wonderful to hear such excitement in your voice." Lily smiled, reaching over to squeeze Beatrice's arm gratefully. "It feels like waking up," she admitted. "Like I've been half asleep for years and am finally beginning to stir." Inside the house, Lily was surprised to find Richard home. His footsteps approached as she hung her coat in the foyer closet. "How was your lesson?" he asked, his tone carefully casual. "It was wonderful," Lily replied honestly. "Eleanor, Professor Mitchell, is an excellent teacher." Richard made a non-committal sound. "I'm glad it went well." He paused, then added, "I had lunch with Harold Wilson today.